Good afternoon, pro-life patriots. Woo. It is a blessing and an honor to be here with you today. I am Scott Coburn. I'm the CMO of Patriot Mobile, America's only Christian conservative cell phone provider. And before I introduce our breakout session, Abortion on the Ballot, I just want to take just a minute and tell you a little bit about Patriot Mobile. Again, we are America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. We're a cell phone company and a good one. And I can say this with complete confidence. There is not another cell phone service provider in this country that does as much for life as Patriot Mobile. And I'll tell you, here's the deal. One of our 4 pillars is the sanctity of life. We believe that it is our duty to defend the rights of our unborn children. And we also believe that it is equally important that we cover with love and compassion the unexpected pregnancies of mothers that find themselves in an unexpected pregnancy. This is in our DNA. That's why we exist, to support these causes. But here's the truth. On the other side of the equation, there are companies in this country that pump millions of dollars every year into pro-abortion causes. They want to make abortion legal anywhere, anytime, any place. And that's what we're fighting here, right? So just on that fact alone, I would like to think that everybody in this room that's listening would consider switching to Patriot Mobile. But what if I also told you that we're built on the same towers as all 3 of the main carriers in this country? So you're gonna get the same great coverage. What if I also told you that we have 100% US-based customer support? So when you call Patriot Mobile, you're going to be talking to somebody in English that also loves life as much as you do. And also you're going to be knowing that every bill that you pay with Patriot Mobile, a portion of that bill is going to go to support organizations that are on the front line fighting for life, organizations like Students for Life America, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, Concerned Women for America, Alliance Defending Freedom, and many, many more. So I want to ask that all of you please consider joining Patriot Mobile. We're out here in the exhibition hall. We would love to spend some time talking with you, telling you a little bit about our company and what we do. So now let's get down to the great lineup of speakers we have here. So our first speaker certainly needs no introduction. She is the fearless leader and president of Students for Life of America. And as you all know, that she's built one of the largest and most important organizations in the pro-life movement. And she's also a longtime friend of Patriot Mobile. We love her. Kristen Hawkins will be talking about getting ready for battle. And I will tell you, there's not many people I'd rather go to battle with, especially this battle, than Kristen Hawkins. And then we will hear from Tim Garrison. Tim is with the Alliance Defending Freedom. He serves as senior counsel for their Center for Life, where he litigates across the spectrum of matters involving constitutional freedoms and the sanctity of life. And he is a true champion of the movement. And last but certainly not least, we will be hearing from the one and only Marjorie Dannenfelser. And you guys know Marjorie. LA Times calls her the woman who brought down Roe. And she is also the president of SBA Pro-Life America, the largest and most important grassroots organization in the pro-life movement. And she will be talking about how elections have consequences. So without further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage Ms. Kristen Hawkins.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Nice hat. I like it. You bought it today. I love it. Friends, if I'm honest with you, and I usually always am, which usually is the reason I get in trouble, this November hurt. Not because there was a big W in the abortion industry's back pocket after Ohio, or seeing the pro-abortion governor of Kentucky get reelected. Thank you, but because we know it wasn't just about a notch in our electoral victory belt. The elections were about lives. It hurt because of the lives of thousands of babies who were on the line and whose lives may very well now be lost in Ohio and in Kentucky and in Virginia even. It was a horrific realization the night of the election to think about that. But 2024 is a new year. And as I said this morning, sorry, I'm losing my time, we have risen to fight. We've risen to fight again. Just like what our movement did for the 49 years under Roe versus Wade. We never gave up, but we always worked hard to support and provide for mothers in crisis, save lives on literally the sidewalks, to educate millions, and to grow our movement. We didn't shrink or disappear after tragic Supreme Court decisions or election losses we faced. The media headlines that you've been seeing have been discouraging on purpose. On purpose. In fact, I just came out of an ABC interview where I don't know how many times I had to tell them the same damn thing over and over again. No, we're not going to go away. And it's unfathomable to them why we won't quit. The abortion industry, Democrats, and even I would dare say, inside the Beltway kind of Republican Party folks, hope we shrink away. Hope that after electoral defeat, we go home and move on to something else and have a bunch of babies. They don't know their history very well. We have a bunch of babies, and we all bring them to the March for Life to end abortion. The history of our own movement and our history of our country tells us we won't go away. We're Americans. We're stubborn. It's what we do. De Tocqueville even noted that. When George Washington and the Continental Army, they took on the mightiest military force in the world, they knew they would be outspent and outmanned by thousands of trained professionals. Half of the battles, I don't know if you realize this, but half of the battles, probably even more, I was too lazy to Google it too this morning, but half of the battles during the Revolutionary War were W's for the British. They won, they took the ground, they retook the fort. You know how many times these forts kept changing position? Every time the British would come back with more people and defeat the rebels. So how did we eventually win our independence from the mighty British Empire? I told you this morning, does anyone remember? We rose, we fought, we got beat, we rose again. Until the enemy was out of supplies, exhausted, and surrounded. Washington, his generals, our founding fathers who were holed up in Philadelphia, they had a vision of what victory would look like. They went on the offense to relentlessly pursue that vision. And they used some innovative tactics along the way to get it done. And the lesson our movement must learn and that we have to carry forward in our collective memories from this November is that we have to keep going on. What was the word I used this morning? Persist. First, we have to hold a vision. Each of us. We have to challenge ourselves to hold a vision of a post-Roe America where abortion is unthinkable and unavailable, close to our hearts. Always believing it's achievable. Honestly, that's what makes the difference a lot of times between winners and losers. It's really simple sports psychology. Have many of you played sports and been told you have to envision the win? Winning Super Bowl teams do not envision the loss. I will tell you that. Second, we have to demand that Republicans join the pro-life movement. Actually join the pro-life movement. Don't just pay us lip service. Don't just pay us lip services by saying you're pro-life or promoting false compromises that allow the majority of abortions to continue. That set us up, I think, for disaster long term. The left of France. We can't be afraid to push our friends to do more. You know, I was at a conference and I took a couple of our Students for Life Action captains at a conference recently. And I was being kind of lazy, so I said, you all go out and mingle and come back and tell me what we've learned today, how many people we've met, folks we can partner with. And Aaliyah, I don't know if she's in the room, Aaliyah, one of our state captains, came back that night, and we were a grouping of all the people in the conservative movement that were in this room. And she said, I can't remember, I talked to this guy, and she was telling me her conversation, and I said, what's his name? She goes, I don't know, but he said to me, oh, you work for that girl who's never satisfied. And at first I was a little angry about that. I was like, I want a name, Aaliyah. What is his name? Who said that about me? But then later in bed that night, I was scrolling Instagram. I was thinking about how mad I was about that guy talking about me. And I realized, I want that guy's name because I want to give him a big hug. He understands me, and he understands you. We are the folks who are never satisfied. We can't be afraid to push our friends to do more, to always do more, to make sure those who aren't our friends fear us because they know we're going to show up. We're not going to forget about them. Students for Life Action captains are going to show up with model spines to their offices and congratulating them on You Need to Grow a Spine award and take a picture with them. And they don't know what to do. That was my favorite thing we did this year at Students for Life Action. It was glorious to watch these older so-called pro-life leaders have to hold a spine given to them by pro-life students. You guys rock. I couldn't believe you all did it with a straight face. It was amazing. We have to demand that Republicans get the Democrats to publicly admit what we know, but they hide, that the vast majority of our generation, in fact, 9 out of 10 Gen Y and Gen Z voters oppose, that they support abortion up until the moment of birth for any reason. And they haven't met an abortion they don't like. As we saw this week on Thursday, when the House of Representatives passed Students for Life Action's first federally inspired bill, the Pregnant Students' Rights Act, that should have been a unanimous vote. Why? Because all it did was say federally funded educational institutions must tell their students, women, about their Title IX rights if they become pregnant. They're federally guaranteed rights that they have not to be discriminated against if they're pregnant, and where they can go for help if they choose to carry their child to term. That was it. That was all the bill said. It wasn't that controversial. Yet every single Democrat either abstained or voted no against giving pregnant women information about their rights. Yeah, that's right. That's the nicest thing I could say about that. We have to demand our friends hold Democrats to account for that abortion extremism because they're not pro-choice, they're pro-abortion. And they made that clear. I don't care if a politician, elected official, has an R or D or I beside their name. I care if they have a PLG beside their name. Pro-life generation. Because we are not, and we need to remember this, an extension of the Republican Party. And we are a human rights movement. And yes, we have many friends in the Republican Party. And I'm so grateful for leaders like Phyllis Schlafly, who ensured that the Republican Party is the party of life. I am a Republican. But we have to remember what it is we're doing every day. And that's advocating for human life. Third, you all know I'm bossy. We must be willing to embrace and try new strategies and tactics to fight like the Davids we are. Because you won't win against a Goliath if you're a David and you try to use a Goliath tactic. It's not possible. We knew, sadly, that we would be outspent significantly in places like Ohio and Virginia and Kentucky this November. The legacy media, Hollywood, they're all on their side in the pro-abortion movement. And those who profit from the despair of women and the violence of abortion, they were all in on spreading more lies, more fear. We need to find our sling and our smooth stones. We need to find those stones. What are they? Our movement, our friends in the Republican Party need to touch some grass. Now, if you're Gen Z, you laughed at that statement and you knew what I was talking about. If you weren't, look it up. It means get real. I learned it. We had to touch some grass. I was waiting. That was so cute. I was looking at your all's faces. We had to touch some grass. And understand that those consultants, those in Washington who, for the 18 years that Students for Life has been in existence, have said that abortion is a losing issue, who are wrong when they said that Roe versus Wade would never fall, that they've always been wrong. And those that say now that we shouldn't be talking, that Republican candidates, those seeking for office, should hide from the abortion issue, they continue to be wrong. For we won't win if we put our head in the stand. My friend Marjorie, who's going to be coming up here to speak, a woman I love and respect so much, she calls it the ostrich strategy, that they're little ostriches. We can't do that. We have to stand for truth. We have to stand for human dignity. We have to remind America what happens behind the closed doors of every government-funded Planned Parenthood and abortion facility every single day. And that our opinion on this issue, the issue, is not outside of the mainstream, no matter how many times ABC wants to try to tell me it is. In fact, our poll at the Institute for Pro-Life Advancement that we released this Tuesday found that 65% of Gen Z and Gen Y voters, let's be honest, the most liberal part of our electorate, the least church part of our electorate, we got problems, people, it's not just abortion, but 65% of them want some sorts of limits on abortion. Only 1 in 10 supported the DNC's platform, the Democratic National Committee's platform, that they demand all their federal candidates adhere to. Only 1 out of 10 said they agree with that platform of abortion whenever, wherever, taxpayer funded. We also need to get and develop new ways to get our message out quickly to voters, cutting through the BS, the lies that they constantly are feeding us on social media. Do you know this fall in Ohio, we were changing the minds of pro-choice voters for about $12 a student we spoke to. Took a conversation, it took a few minutes, but we were able to change minds. On social media, our team of 50 student volunteers in Ohio, if there's any kids from Ohio here, you need to give yourself a hug and a pat on the back at the same time. They were working so hard. Student pro-life leaders in Ohio are working so diligent to combat all the lies on social media. In fact, in one study, these Ohio students, it came up in the study, Students for Life had the highest social media presence in the state on issue 1. Yeah, we did. Yeah, that's right. Ahead of the New York Times and ABC. That was crazy. People were like, what are you doing? How much are you paying? And I was like, $0. The third thing we've got to do to find these stones is we never can underestimate the power of our action, collective grassroots action, to get voters out to vote and to get them to vote early. To get them to vote early. We can win if you join us. That's why Students for Life has already launched our efforts in 17 states. We'll be involved in primaries this spring, knocking on doors, educating voters, making sure when we get to the generals in November, we have candidates that have PLG beside them. That's why today I encourage you to go to Abortion on the Ballot, 2024.com. It's super simple. Abortion on the Ballot, 2024.com. Sign up to help us. Become a campus captain, a social media ambassador. Sign up to knock on doors or lobby in your state for pro-life laws. Start one of our Campaign for Abortion-Free Cities efforts. We will literally give you a free kit based on our Institute for Pro-Life Advancement messaging research on how to change the minds of your neighbors about extreme late-term abortion constitutional amendments. We could get started with all of that. And we even help you run for office. We have a lot of Students for Life alumni now serving in office. I can go on and on and on. And I have a list of ideas. But for now, I want you to remember, our mission to end abortion, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Cultural transformation will take time, but we're here for it. We will persist. We will not go away. So as we prepare for 2024, do more than ever before. Thank you.
When I was 5 years old, I saw a man point a 9mm pistol at my mother's head and fire. It was August 6, 1981, before most of you were a twinkle in your mother's eye. But my mom was taking me and my little sister from our home in Springfield, Missouri, to visit our grandparents in southern Indiana. We drove from our home in Springfield up I-44 to St. Louis, crossed the Mississippi River, and into southern Illinois. And a few miles later, we heard a pop and felt a tire go flat. Mom pulled over onto the side of the road, and a car that had been traveling beside us pulled in behind us. We assumed a good Samaritan had seen our tire go flat and was going to help us change the tire. But two men got out of that car and walked to either side of ours. And the man that walked to the driver's side lifted on the door handle but found that it was locked. He told my mom to get out of the car, and when she refused, that's when he stuck that pistol in her face. Now, some might quibble with what mom did next, but she didn't have any good options. And it's a mother's instinct to put as much distance between her children and danger as possible. So without a thought, she threw that car into gear and stomped on the gas pedal. Our car lurched forward, and that's when the man shot. Now, that car hadn't moved very much, maybe just a few inches. But by the grace of God, it was enough that instead of the driver's side window, that bullet's point of impact was that thin strip of steel on the edge of the driver's side door. And that was just enough to deflect that bullet downward so that instead of hitting mom in the head, it hit her in the arm. As she was holding the steering wheel, the bullet hit her just below her left shoulder, passed through her left biceps, just missing the brachial artery that runs there, and exited just above her elbow. And then that bullet passed over her pregnant belly. I failed to mention she was also 6 months pregnant at the time. Mom screamed, but she didn't lose focus. Steering with her injured left arm and making a tourniquet with her right hand, she drove as fast as that little car could go on 4 cylinders and 3 tires to the next exit, which was the tiny little southern Illinois corn town of New Baden, Illinois, population 3,000. And what happened next is a literal tale of cops and robbers, which I'd be happy to share with you afterward. But suffice it to say, mom survived, she healed from her wounds, and 3 months later, my little brother was born. He's now a grown man and a teacher in Springfield, Missouri, and has 7 children of his own. Now, some of you are surely saying, that's a crazy story, Tim, but aren't you supposed to be talking about abortion referenda? And you're right. That's what I'm supposed to be talking about. But the reason I tell this story is because it highlights the incongruity of the laws of our country that directly relate to the abortion referenda that are working their way across ballots in the country right now. You see, if that robber had succeeded in what he tried to do, which was kill my mother, he would have almost have certainly killed my little brother as well. And under the laws in the vast majority of states, even in pro-abortion states like Illinois, he would have been criminally and civilly liable for taking the life of not one person, but 2. That law protects the unborn in that context. But in the twisted logic of abortion, activists in many states are working to remove protections for the unborn through the referendum process, exposing them to mortal danger. When the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision a year and a half ago, it used language that was poetry to those who have been working for nearly a half century to protect the unborn under the regime of Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Justice Alito, writing for the majority, said, "The United States Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. Roe and Casey must be overturned, and the authority to regulate abortion must be returned to the people and their elected representatives." And pro-life states were ready. In the wake of the Dobbs decision, when the boot of Roe versus Wade was lifted off of the states, many of them immediately jumped to restore or enact protections for the unborn. But while the Supreme Court finally said what's plain to anyone who can read, that the United States Constitution does not confer a right to abortion, the abortion industry is working feverishly to insert a new right to abortion in state constitutions across the country. The national debate over abortion did not end with the Dobbs decision, and now we have to guard against having 50 rows across the states. State constitutions in 4 states, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, and Tennessee, explicitly provide that there is no state right to abortion in their constitution or a right to taxpayer funding of abortion. But in the wake of Dobbs, 4 other states, California, Michigan, Ohio, and Vermont, have enshrined a right to abortion in their state constitutions. Kristen just talked about the Ohio referendum that passed in November. An analysis of that vote talks about or reveals some pretty sobering statistics. First, voters responded positively to the abortion industry's appeal to personal freedom and bodily autonomy. We have to deal head on with that narrative and respond to those arguments. Second, voters said that they were both angry and confused by the overturning of Roe. Our side needs to be better at explaining why Roe was bad and why Dobbs is a much better solution. Third, and most importantly, to defeat these proposals, we cannot take any voter for granted. For example, and this was shocking to me, 30% of Ohio voters who believe that life begins at conception still voted to add a right to abortion in their state constitution. 31% of voters who attend church more than once a week, still voted for that amendment to the state constitution. So if people who understand that abortion ends a human life, and people who are regulars at their local churches are still voting for abortion in those proportions, we have a lot of hearts and minds to change. So what's happening right now? Well, efforts are underway in at least 12 states to put measures on the ballot to enshrine abortion into state constitutions in 2024. 2 states, Maryland and New York, have already approved through their state legislatures ballot questions that will be on their ballot in 2024. But most of the potential abortion amendments are currently going through the process of collecting signatures from registered voters. And you can see where those are happening in the pink states across the country. These are the battleground states in 2024. So let's talk for a moment about what these state constitutional amendments might do. First, they will promote unrestricted abortion on demand. According to our analysis of the language that's being proposed, these referenda could create an unrestricted right to abortion up through the moment of birth for virtually any reason. They could confer rights to abortion that are even less restrained than what was allowed under Roe and Casey. If you read those cases, then you know that they involve this judicially imagined concept of viability, beyond which even those 2 bad Supreme Court opinions said states can regulate abortion. But in most of these amendments, that restriction is not there. So unrestricted abortion is on the ballot. What about existing pro-life laws in those states? These proposed amendments could invalidate existing abortion-related laws that provide reasonable and much-needed protection for women and girls. These include parental involvement laws, informed consent requirements, health and safety standards for abortion providers and facilities, protections against coercion, and limitations on discriminatory abortions, such as those on the basis of the race or sex or disability of the child, or dangerous late-term abortions. And the language of the proposed amendments prohibits any interference with the newly conferred state constitutional right to abortion. Anything that might delay or restrict access to abortion could be seen as that interference. When a statute comes into conflict with the constitutional provision, the Constitution trumps that existing statute. The abortion industry already tries to get courts to invalidate pro-life statutes. For example, last month I had the privilege to argue before the Wyoming Supreme Court, trying to defend Wyoming's Life is a Human Right Act. That statute is being challenged based on what the state's lone abortionist calls an implicit right to abortion in Wyoming's constitution. But if these referenda are successful in creating an explicit right to abortion in those states, they will just further embolden the abortion industry to challenge any efforts by states to enact or enforce protections for mothers and their unborn children. Our opponents are fond of saying, well, if you don't like abortion, well, then don't have one. But if these constitutional amendments pass, and if you pay taxes in these states, you may nevertheless find yourself financially contributing to the funding of abortions. State taxpayers could be forced to pay for elective abortions for residents, for non-residents, for women and girls, because under these 12 proposals, if there is a newly created constitutional right to abortion in these states, then failure to fund an abortion could be interpreted as that interference that I mentioned earlier. Interference with the right and providing a basis to invalidate any law against public funding of abortion. These referenda also threaten parental rights, and I want to camp out here for just a moment. As with any other surgery or prescription medication, most states require parental notice or consent before a minor can have a surgery or a chemical abortion, a surgical or chemical abortion. Only 9 states, and here in the District of Columbia, have no such law. Parents play an irreplaceable role in shielding their children from harm, and these statutes play a crucial role in detecting child abuse and sex trafficking. We all understand that children cannot appreciate the long-term mental, physical, and emotional consequences of their decision. But again, abortion activists are already attacking state laws requiring parental notification in a child's decision to get an abortion. Right now, Alliance Defending Freedom is supporting the state of Montana in its attempt to defend its parental consent law in the case of Planned Parenthood versus Montana. See, in that state, a child cannot get her ears pierced without the physical presence or consent of her parents. But Planned Parenthood thinks that they ought to be able to perform a surgical abortion or give her a chemical abortion drug to young girls without a parent's notice or consent. And I'll add, they do so at about $500 to $2,000 a pop. It's a very profitable industry for them. And if these 12 constitutional amendments pass, they'll just be emboldened to bring similar suits in other states. Under these proposals, any person, including a minor, can assert a constitutional right to abortion. Arguably, that right could not be interfered with. And again, involving the parents could be determined to be an interference with that new constitutional right. Now, this obviously has strong implications for the respect that the law has for the primacy of the parent-child relationship, which is already coming under attack in other contexts. But kids belong to their families. They don't belong to their government. They don't belong to their schools. And they sure don't belong to Planned Parenthood. But as a longtime prosecutor, let me talk about one other aspect of these referenda. This concerns me deeply. And when you think about this, if a child cannot consent under the statutes of her law, of her state, then by definition, if she becomes pregnant, she has been the victim of a crime. And if abortionists can perform an abortion on such a girl without her parents' knowledge or consent, in addition to destroying the life of the unborn child, that act is destroying evidence of a crime. And the elimination of parental involvement requirements makes it easier for statutory rapists and sex traffickers to coerce girls into abortion to destroy evidence of their criminal acts. We have to help voters understand the ramifications of these constitutional amendments. What effect would these constitutional amendments have on healthcare providers who want nothing to do with abortion? Well, even while Roe versus Wade was in effect, it was largely accepted that individual doctors and nurses could not be required to participate in abortion. After the Dobbs decision, however, we are seeing that understanding come under fire. Alliance Defending Freedom is representing pro-life obstetricians and gynecologists in Texas and Idaho against the Justice Department of the Biden administration. The DOJ, who I served for many years, is now arguing that the federal law that requires emergency room to stabilize patients without regard to their ability to pay also requires emergency room doctors and nurses to perform abortions. If these state constitutional amendments create a state right to abortion, then laws protecting the conscience of healthcare professionals and allowing them to opt out of performing or participating in abortions will be endangered. Just as the DOJ is now doing at the federal level, abortion advocates will argue that such opt-outs are, again, impermissible interference with that new state constitutional right to abortion. And in this contest of rights, the freedom of conscience recognized under both the United States and state constitutions could be treated as subservient to this new right to abortion created by these proposals. So freedom of conscience is also on the ballot. Now, in conclusion, I don't want this information to be discouraging, but I hope it motivates you to act. I know I'm preaching to the choir. If you come to Washington, D.C. in January for the cause of life, you are committed. This is not a wintertime tourist destination. So I know you're committed. But too many of our friends assumed that when the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision that we won. And in so doing, we underestimated how energized the abortion industry would become. And it is an industry, a very profitable industry. We see this new pro-abortion energy in the lawsuits that Alliance Defending Freedom and others are fighting, but also in these abortion referenda in states from coast to coast. So I have work to do, and you have work to do. As the Apostle Paul wrote in Galatians, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. So thank you for all that you have done for the cause of life, for all that you are going to do. And thank you for being here. I hope that you are all encouraged by seeing so many other passionate pro-life activists. So let's celebrate our victories, and then let's go out and get back to work. God bless you.
I was told to move these this way, so. Well, boy, it is great to see you. I love the March for Life. I love this conference. Of course, I've marched in many, many marches like a couple of y'all have. And there's nothing like that march, especially yesterday with the snow, with all that is required of all of us marching. It just shows the perseverance, the fortitude, the sacrifice of the pro-life movement, that God is here and that will propel us in the future. And somebody yesterday said to me, have you ever thought about the fact that when it snows at the March for Life, it's God's little witness. Each of those snowflakes is perfectly and uniquely made and irrepeatable. At least that's what I believe is true about science and the snowflake, but I'm sure it's true of the unborn child and his or her mother. 50 years, we have been fighting, marching, praying. Every year that we have defeats, we get called out. It's the end of the pro-life movement. These are the political prognosticators. 2012 looms large. Many of you were little then, but I remember it well. We lost everything, and we were called out, and we were never to rise again. And at the march, which it just got bigger. The movement grew. There was something that people weren't seeing, and that was the truth at the base of the pro-life movement, the justice and the mercy of this cause for women and children. So we marched and we marched and we prayed. We didn't get discouraged. The fortitude continued. And then we with our partners in the Senate and in the White House and in the Supreme Court, I would call them not partners, but people who had fealty to the Constitution, saw fit to overturn Roe versus Wade. So now here we are. We marched and we thought what to plan for the day. And now here we are, looking forward to a day where abortion is unthinkable, where it is outlawed everywhere. Democracy is now unleashed. And that will lead us on the process of making that day very possible. When we're serving women and protecting women in the law, it will be because democracy is unleashed in every single state and in the nation, so that the true values of Americans that are reflected in the Constitution will be embedded in U.S. law. just as it should be. And it's a moment to celebrate, but you know, it hasn't been missed on any of us, right? That it has been a little bit hard. Kristen alluded to, and we all know, some of the very difficult and painful losses that we've experienced over time. And every time I'm in a media interview, the question is, are you about to give up? I mean, how do you feel about the losses? And I just think about all those marches, all those past disappointments where we just got stronger because we knew that the consequences were greater and greater. Every time they call us out, you know you're a little bit closer, right? So that's exactly where we are. And you know what? Look at every other major Supreme Court decision that was a landmark that affected human rights. And think about the backlash right after those times. Those decisions weren't popular at the time at all. So we have to look back and think about that, focus on that, and make sure that our expectations are realistic about what we should be experiencing now. And that fortitude, that who we are, is going to come back and save the day. Think about Brown versus Board of Education. As soon as segregation was outlawed in this country, the so-called leaders in this country, under the guidance of then Congressman Robert Byrd, created a Southern Manifesto. Over 100 congressmen signed this manifesto, and that manifesto said, put up all sorts of ways to fight integration, to keep segregation in line in our country. And they created this program called Massive Resistance, where there were a whole series of laws that, and a series of actions that kept integration from happening. But the linchpin was to cut off state funds for any states that allowed integration to happen in their, not to the states, but to the schools. Anybody who allowed integration to happen, cut their funds off, closed those schools down because they had the nerve to integrate white and black in the schools in the country. So this, of course, happened in many states, including Virginia, just down the road. And it was immediately then taken up by the Virginia Supreme Court and overturned. That was outlawed, that action, because they did close down schools. When black and white started to walk into the school, think of being that little black girl walking into that school, or that little black boy being spat on, and then your school gets closed down because you walked into it because of who you were. And think of that pain. Of course, the Virginia State Supreme Court overturned it, and then the federal court said, of course, these actions were illegal under the Equal Protection Law of the 14th Amendment. So think of those children, and think of the pain involved there, and think of the pain now for women and unborn children. We're in a moment of cultural friction, a moment of great need for healing, and a great need and a call for justice in the law. And so we shouldn't expect that it would be a neat path. We have to be adults. No matter our age, we have to be adults in terms of the human rights battle and the human rights leaders that every single one in this room is, all together locking arms. So those children were caught after Brown versus Board of Education. Our unborn precious children, they're caught in the middle of this. And yet we have had major successes across the country. Half the states acting, and now there's some erosion. But what must happen now is that we have to fight for our Constitution, our justice in the law, and mercy in every single community for the women that are facing unplanned pregnancy. So here's what we're up against, because this didn't happen, just like in other times where there's a Supreme Court decision where there's a lot of people pushing back. Of course, there are a lot of people pushing back now. So there are some people that say, wait, just wait till the dust settles. This is what many in the Republican Party are saying right now. Let's just see how things go. To those who say wait, I would answer with Martin Luther King, who said, human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. Because then at that moment, he says, people of ill will use their time more effectively. People of ill will, people who are opposing our efforts to save unborn children and truly serve their mothers, are creating ads like these that have money behind them that are blowing the doors off some of our campaigns. So let me play that ad real quick from Virginia.
I'm Kimberly Pope Adams, candidate for delegate, and I sponsored this ad.
If Republicans like Kim Taylor have their way, Virginia will be the next state to pass an extreme abortion ban. Her family ran and funded a crisis pregnancy center, tricking women into carrying non-viable pregnancies. An abortion ban would hurt so many more, putting women and doctors in jail, and even could deny care to 10-year-old rape victims. We cannot allow Kim Taylor to ban abortion in Virginia.
So money behind those lies can accomplish a
Kimberly-
lot, and it did so in 2022. They spent $500 million on ads just like this. This was a Virginia example of a really horrible ad. But then they spent $500 million between campaigns and outside groups to advance that lie. I don't have to tell you that the pro-life movement doesn't have that amount of money. But I do know this. All of us must commit to being the citizens we are supposed to be and get involved in this next election to preserve the Dobbs decision. It is not a foregone conclusion that it will stand as it is, giving us the freedom to protect as we wish. It could very easily be a dead letter, and there is a commitment to that at the top of the Democratic Party and all of their candidates to make Dobbs a dead letter through two means. The Women's Health Protection Act, the most Orwellian name available, where, if passed, would strike down every single pro-life law in this nation and go well beyond Roe. In the Women's Health Protection Act, there is no mention of any sort of protection for the unborn child. Therefore, informed consent, waiting periods, such things, parental consent are not necessary. Therefore, and the Democratic Party has said this is one area, and perhaps the only, that we would be willing to overturn the filibuster rule just so we can get this through Congress and get it signed into law. That is a hair's breadth away. The other thing that's a hair's breadth away is the Supreme Court and who sits on it now. There are some old members of the Supreme Court that decided in our favor in Dobbs. If any one of them left, and there was a president and a Senate that sets Supreme Court judges that would like to undermine or completely overturn Dobbs, that could easily happen in a short period of time. Therefore, involvement in the federal elections, this election is vital, every single one of us. And so how does that look? I think you mostly know, but I just want to remind you where we win and lose federal elections are generally what we call the battleground states, and this time it is basically these states where Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America has been already set up since summer of last year, going door to door. The states are Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Montana, Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, and Ohio. There very well may be a couple more, but those are the core, and those are where we are now. And those are the places where we will reach 10 million voters who are either Republican, Democrat, Independent, they're persuadable, might not vote, but those are the people we need to reach with a message that is tailored especially to them, that will draw them to vote for the pro-life senator or the pro-life Senate candidate or the pro-life president. We must succeed at that. And again, I say, we do not have the resources as the other side does. They will absolutely spend far more. It's been predicted they'll spend just under $1 billion between candidates and outside groups on this type of advertising. And it started this week, leading up to Vice President and the Vice President and the President speaking in Virginia about the priority of abortion in all of their campaigns. So where we lack in some, I've basically fundraised every day of my life. I'm traveling all over the country fundraising, so I'm gonna do all that I can. And we, in our organization, will raise $50 million to do this. Not even close. But so what we do lack in some of that, in that communication through advertising must be made up through our conversations, our council of candidates about the message that they should be projecting, how to project it, and that they must do it. The Oxford strategy proved to be fatal in the 22 elections. Putting our heads up, communicating with compassion, clarity, and providing a contrast with other candidates is vital, or we will definitely lose. Kellyanne Conway and I have teamed up to do that training with Senate candidates, Senate incumbents, House candidates, House incumbents, and whoever our presidential nominee is. Those communications, along with the other ones that I just mentioned, have been long in progress. They also, those candidates, need to hear from you. You will meet them, you know them, most of you, encouraging them to be clear and concise and provide those contrasts. And when they are tempted to say nothing, or to say, hey, if you could just wait, everything will be fine. Those are the key words to know that they will be defined by their candidate, their opponent, since they are not defining themselves. Our job is to absolutely define what the Biden administration and everyone running on that team, running for the Senate and the House, what are they for? And the Democratic governors of this country. The contrast serves us every single time. There is no limit that they will ever name. And so we have the battle of a lifetime ahead of us. I don't know if the door-to-door program that we have been running since 2014 has grown and grown and grown over time. And I want to invite you that if you're from one of these states or you're not from one of these states, we want to recruit you to go door to door and have what is an ancient and beautiful art, and that is the art of persuasion between two people. And while their arguments from science are always convincing, there also is the Holy Spirit. And when 2 or 3 are gathered together in his name, at every single door, he is there too. And this is where we win. Our communications will come human being to human being, and they'll also come wherever anybody gets their information. It'll be impossible to avoid us. But as time gets closer to the election, it'll be more and more difficult to communicate because all of those communication channels will be clogged. So I say now is the time, if you are able to allow us to hire you to be a canvasser in any one of these states, please let us know. And so I just want to thank you the way I always like to in an audience of great pro-life leaders and apologists for the cause, and say to you, I was very pro-choice and would have had an abortion in a minute, thought I was gonna have an abortion, didn't want any ideas entering my brain space or my heart in those moments. And I was so good at that that I would have absolutely had one. I thank God that it became unnecessary. But I will say what happened to me then is I met people like you and some of the particular people in this room, possible that I actually did meet you. And so I want to thank you, and I know it is not easy. If you've always thought this way, thank God for sticking with your values and seeing the precious child and his or her mother. If you're a convert to this cause, thank you for your courage and for passing the baton. And finally, I love you. Thank you so much.